Kim Woo Jin was an ugly loser who never let anyone see the weak spot on his back. Since childhood, he had hated this world and the cruel people within it. Everyone treated him like trash, throwing him away once he was no longer useful. Because of that, Kim Woo Jin became constantly wary of those around him and chose to live alone. He trusted no one and eliminated anyone who tried to take advantage of him. This continued until the apocalypse began. Gates, like those in solo leveling, started appearing out of nowhere, and soon the entire world was overrun by monsters. Cities were destroyed, and humans fell like flies. Just when everyone thought it was the end, a mysterious god-like being called Hollow appeared and granted humans the power to fight back against the monsters. This power gave people a game-like system, and those who received it became players. People believed these chosen ones would slaughter monsters and save the world. However, the so-called heroes were more interested in making money, as the monster business was extremely profitable. Despite the world-shaking events, nothing changed for Kim Woo Jin, who remained as lonely as ever. He already understood the darkness within human hearts, so he wasn't surprised when the players turned out to be hypocritical cowards, only seeking profit and power to control the world. Kim Woo Jin planned to stay away from the affairs of heroes for the rest of his life. However, everything changed when he met Lee Sejun. To Kim Woo Jin, Lee Sejun was like an angel among humans, the only player who helped humanity without expecting anything in return. Lee Sejun's influence was so great that others who shared his mindset began to follow him in order to save the world. Kim Woo Jin was no different, as he also felt a responsibility to help humanity as one of them. In the end, Kim Woo Jin joined the Messiah Guild and began following Lee Sejun on his mission, to slaughter monsters and save mankind. During that time, he gained many new companions he could trust. Slowly but surely, Kim Woo Jin began to change, although he himself didn't know whether that change would lead to good or evil. Back in the present, Kim Woo Jin stood in front of a gate that looked like the entrance to a boss room in Dark Souls. Like Eren, he wondered aloud and asked Lee Sejun if defeating the final boss beyond the door would finally set them free. Lee Sejun replied that this might indeed be the final battle, at least for him. Confused, Kim Woo Jin turned toward Lee Sejun to ask what he meant. But before he could say anything, Lee Sejun drew his sword and stabbed him, skewering him like a piece of meat. Lee Sejun thanked him for his contributions and expressed his appreciation for helping him reach the highest level. Kim Woo Jin fell to his knees as his eyes fixed on the status window, which displayed a warning that he had been restricted, affected by a balloon curse. The curse reduced all his resistance and protection by 90%. With his body trembling, Kim Woo Jin asked Lee Sejun if everything had been planned from the very beginning. Instead of Lee Sejun, it was his right-hand man, Park Sin-hee, who mocked Kim Woo Jin for his naivety. He explained that if the players ended the game, they would return to the previous Earth, where governments once again ruled the world. Without the strength and abilities they currently possessed, how could they compete? They intended to control the world with an iron fist and live in luxury. Kim Woo Jin shouted Lee Sejun's name as the heavenly viper poison spread throughout his body. Seeing that he was still alive, Park Sin-hee was rather impressed. Not only was Kim Woo Jin affected by the balloon curse, but he had also been poisoned with heavenly viper. Such special treatment was given only to him, as others were too weak and would have died from the poison alone. At that moment, Kim Woo Jin finally realized how all his former comrades had died. That realization shook him to his core. He had trusted the wrong people. Lee Sejun and Park Sin-hee had betrayed everyone who had entrusted their lives to them. His blood boiled with rage as he recalled the faces of those he once knew. With his body trembling, Kim Woo Jin asked if they felt no guilt for killing those people simply because they interfered with their future plans. Seeing that they did not care at all, his entire body shook with anger. However, he was too weak to do anything and could only scream at their backs as they slowly disappeared from his sight. In his final moments, Kim Woo Jin realized that trusting others had been the greatest mistake of his life. He hoped that if there were a next life, he would not be foolish enough to repeat the same mistake. With that thought, he breathed his last and collapsed to the ground. Moments after his death, a prompt appeared on the screen, signaling the start of the game. Elsewhere, a military vehicle sped down the highway with several soldiers inside. They discussed the increasing number of monsters emerging from dungeons. Some were worried, while others were excited because it meant they could make more money. Among them was a man who had been sleeping before suddenly waking up in shock. That man was Kim Woo Jin, who had returned to the past, to the exact moment he first awakened his powers. Kim Woo Jin was stunned because before this moment, he had been betrayed by Lee Sejun and died inside a dungeon, his body left to rot in the wilderness. Yet now, he was alive again, back to the time when the game had only just begun. Before he could fully understand the situation, the vehicle suddenly stopped as the driver saw something terrifying ahead. The entire highway was filled with massive orcs glaring at them menacingly. The driver immediately warned the others, and they quickly grabbed their weapons to fight and eliminate the orc horde. The team leader reminded everyone that their ammunition was limited, so every bullet had to count. Just as the briefing was about to end, the leader noticed Kim Woo Jin fighting the orcs alone. With a submachine gun in hand, Kim Woo Jin wasted no bullets and single-handedly wiped out the entire horde. Every shot was a headshot. Before long, every green orc had been exterminated. Kim Woo Jin stood in the middle of the battlefield, radiating the aura of a true predator. The other soldiers were shocked and desperately wanted to know who this extraordinary man was. However, Kim Woo Jin was lost in his own thoughts, trying to adapt to a body that had not yet fully synchronized with the system's power. It still felt like a dream. His focus returned when the commander scolded him for recklessly fighting alone and stealing all the kills. Kim Woo Jin paid no attention to the selfish leader who only cared about himself, as his mind was still haunted by memories of his previous life, when he was betrayed by his own comrades. Suddenly, a notification rang in his ears and a system panel appeared before his eyes. The system congratulated him on becoming a new player and displayed several classes for him to choose from. Kim Woo Jin remembered that this was the very day he first gained power in his previous life. However, this time, several things were different. Unlike before, 3 new classes were now available, one of them being Dark World Surrogate, a class with the power to control curses and various poisons. Not only that, the class also allowed its user to summon undead monsters, turning them into a necromancer capable of fighting alone like an entire army. This class once belonged to a man named Johann Georg, also known as the Immortal King because of his overwhelming power through undead armies and control over thousands of curses. With such terrifying strength, Johann Georg was considered the strongest player in the world. Even Lee Sejun was no match for him in a one-on-one battle. Kim Woo Jin once viewed Lee Sejun as a hero, while Johann Georg was seen as the evil final boss of the game. In his previous life, Kim Woo Jin devoted his entire existence to researching and analyzing Johann Georg in order to hunt him down under Lee Sejun's orders. But in this life, with the power of Dark World Surrogate, he would instead become the hunter, and Lee Sejun would be the prey. As the system became widespread and players began appearing everywhere, powerful individuals formed groups known as guilds. At first, guilds existed merely to profit from wars against monsters. However, with the rise of the Messiah Guild, corrupt guilds like Phoenix Guild began to collapse because people finally had heroes they could rely on. At least, that was how things unfolded in Kim Woo Jin's previous life. Now he knew the truth. Messiah Guild was nothing more than a gathering of traitors. Because of that, Kim Woo Jin decided to join the once corrupt Phoenix Guild instead. There was a saying that corruption was only bad when you were not the one benefiting from it. At Phoenix Guild headquarters, a man offered Kim Woo Jin a contract to join the guild. He explained the various terms, including extra fees required whenever a dungeon was cleared and other similar conditions. Kim Woo Jin read the contract and realized that although there were many rewards, the money earned was still not enough to purchase important items. However, at this stage, there was little he could do. He then moved on and asked the manager how one could prove their status as a player, since only players could see the system panel. The manager smiled faintly and explained that the guild had its own method for verifying players. He placed 5 cards in front of Kim Woo Jin and told him to choose one. If the card burned, it would prove that he was truly a player, as all 5 were skill cards. Kim Woo Jin's gaze fell upon a different skill card. It was called Hemotoxin, a skill belonging to the Dark Lord Sovereign class. The skill granted the ability to turn blood into poison, and its power would continue to grow alongside the user's level. Kim Woo Jin never expected to discover such an incredible skill from his own class during the early stages of the game. Without hesitation, he immediately accepted it and tore the skill card apart with his fingers, causing his entire body to glow purple. The manager then adjusted his glasses like the protagonist of a romance anime before welcoming Kim Woo Jin into the guild. That night, Kim Woo Jin dreamed about his previous life. His former comrades had feared him because of the terrible personality he developed after spending years living alone. Even so, he still kept them close to his heart because they were the only people he could trust to guard his back, unlike the street thugs he had encountered before. Back in the present, Woo Jin knew that his old comrades were still alive in this new timeline. However, he had no idea how to approach them, even though he still wanted to see them again and hoped the opportunity would come soon. Meanwhile, at Guanan Sports Park, a group of players waited in the parking lot when a bald man approached them. The bald man greeted everyone and seemed surprised that they had arrived so early. One of the female players immediately began flirting with him since this was her very first dungeon. The bald man, whose name was Yusuf, enjoyed the attention and confidently assured her that he was an experienced dungeon hunter who would definitely protect her. The female player happily promised to reward him if they managed to survive. However, the group was still missing one member. The final participant turned out to be Woo Jin, who arrived driving a worn-out car from the 1950s. Some members laughed at him for being poor, while others were irritated because he was late. Someone even questioned whether Woo Jin could survive his very first hunt, considering he was too poor to buy a decent car, let alone proper weapons. Yusuf eventually grew tired of their complaints and told everyone to be quiet before explaining the dungeon raid plan. The dungeon they were about to enter was an E-rank dungeon. The dungeon was filled only with weak goblins. However, dungeons like this had strict rules. Only players level 10 or below were allowed to enter. Party sizes were also limited to a maximum of 5 members, which was why Woo Jin's team consisted of only 5 people. Inside the briefing room, the Phoenix Guild manager explained that their main mission was to exterminate all the goblins and make it out alive. After the explanation ended, the managers instructed everyone to check their inventories. One of the players was shocked to discover several additional items inside their inventory. Meanwhile, Woo Jin smiled slyly like a true villain because he felt relieved that none of the team members came from his previous life. That meant he could act however he wanted without caring about their safety. After the short meeting, the group entered the dungeon and were immediately stunned by the completely different world inside. Outside, they lived within a concrete jungle, but inside the dungeon, the sky was bright blue and the forest appeared dense and vibrant green. As the group gathered to establish a base camp, Woo Jin carefully observed the surroundings to ensure nothing seemed suspicious. Seeing this, Yusuf ordered Woo Jin to scout the area. Woo Jin accepted the task, surprising Yusuf, who had assumed he would cling to the group for safety. Woo Jin knew the bald man intended to use him as bait, but he did not care at all because, at his core, he was a one-man army. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Messiah Guild, Park Sin stood before a round table where the guild executives were seated. He informed them that he would introduce a new member who would participate in the upcoming mission. After he finished speaking, a man entered the room, immediately shocking several guild members, especially a man named Yongjiwoo, who instantly labeled the newcomer arrogant. The arrogant man introduced himself as Suzuki Ichi and was about to continue speaking. However, after noticing the intense stares directed at him, he realized that most of the faces in the room felt strangely familiar. In the end, he decided to skip the lengthy introduction. Lee Jun, the guildmaster of Messiah Guild, praised Suzuki Ichi as an ambitious individual. However, Suzuki Ichi only cared about the mission ahead, which irritated Yongji even more. Sitting beside him, Yongji immediately warned the newcomer never to speak disrespectfully to the master again. Deep down, Yongji desperately wanted to smash the arrogant man's head against the table. Meanwhile, Suzuki Ichi became curious whether it was his tone that angered Yongji, or perhaps something related to a previous incident. Those words only fueled Yongji's emotions further until he finally exploded and challenged Suzuki Ichi to a duel in order to restore his pride. However, he was silenced by a single word from Lee Jun and obediently sat back down. For now, Yongji could only suppress his anger while silently vowing that one day he would crush Suzuki Ichi's arrogance. After the situation calmed down, Park Shenyi asked about the progress of the previous mission. One member replied that if they only collected minerals, it would take about 3 days. Lee Jun considered the time frame reasonable and approved it. Back to Woo Jin, he continued exploring the dungeon in search of clues about secrets he knew from the past. After some time, he found a tree marked with scratches. It reminded him of his mentor, who taught him that even the smallest piece of information could increase survival chances. That mentor was Suzuki Ichi, who taught him because he was part of the Messiah Guild. Woo Jin realized that Suzuki Ichi was merely a hunting dog for the Messiah Guild. However, he still valued the lessons, as they would help him destroy the guild in this new life. Suddenly, a stone flew past his face and struck a tree behind him. Woo Jin turned and saw a group of goblins ready to attack. In his previous life, at this stage, Woo Jin could only hide from goblins. But now, goblins were merely free training targets to test his hemotoxin skill. He cut his palm and coated his sword with poisonous blood. Using it, he slaughtered goblins while testing its effectiveness. Although the poison was still weak, he was satisfied because goblin attack patterns were easy to read. However, he knew that if there were too many goblins, poison alone wouldn't be enough. So, he took out his trump card from the magic storage, the Goblin Lord Whip, a weapon specifically designed to instill fear in goblins. The goblins became too frightened to attack him. Meanwhile, his teammates were not as fortunate. They were quickly surrounded by goblins. Yusuf, the bald man, showed no fear and easily cut down one goblin. After killing the goblin, Yusuf bragged and told his teammates not to be afraid. He claimed goblins were too weak to be a threat. In reality, he was grateful he had a longsword because goblins were dangerous at close range. When he tried to pull his sword from the goblin's body, it got stuck, giving other goblins a chance to attack. Soon after, Yusuf fell, while his teammates screamed in fear. Meanwhile, Woo Jin continued hunting down fleeing goblins. He whipped them using the Goblin Lord Whip, which dealt 30% extra damage to goblins. This allowed him to farm quickly and turn them into free XP. Before long, he reached level 2 and earned a new achievement called Striving Higher. After the fight, he felt unsatisfied, as goblins were too weak to provide a real challenge. Meanwhile, the remaining 4 players sat under a tree. The previous battle against goblins had left them wounded and traumatized. One of them wondered whether Woo Jin was still alive, since he was the first to separate from the group. However, this sparked an argument among them, as they began blaming each other for the situation. Their argument stopped when they heard goblin screams in the distance, triggering memories of their previous battle. What they didn't realize was that the goblins weren't screaming in excitement. They were being hunted by Woo Jin. After hunting all the goblins, Woo Jin unlocked a new skill called Skeleton Disease. He was surprised to obtain it so quickly. This skill allowed him to turn dead creatures into undead soldiers, similar to the ability once possessed by Johann Georg. However, it had a fatal flaw. The user could only revive creatures they personally killed. Woo Jin didn't mind the limitation. For him, it was perfect for increasing his strength in the early stages. He immediately used the skill on a nearby goblin corpse. Soon, a skeleton rose from the dead. The glow in its eyes satisfied him. It was the gaze of a true warrior. He then tested his first minion. Against a level 1 goblin, the skeleton struggled before eventually winning. The result was somewhat disappointing, but Woo Jin realized the skill scaled with intelligence. He accepted it, as he never intended to rely on skeletons as his main source of damage. Instead, he planned to use human corpses in the dungeon as a stronger source of power. They had arrived long before him. Seeing how cruelly the goblins treated their victims only strengthened Woo Jin's determination to wipe them all out. Meanwhile, inside a random cave, Woo Jin's teammates were hiding in fear. The previous battle had left both physical and mental scars on them. The bald man was furious at himself. He felt weak and cowardly for being unable to protect his teammates, let alone clear the dungeon. As a final decision, he chose to fight the goblins in a life-or-death battle. However, before he could rush out, his teammates stopped him and told him to look above his head. There, he noticed that his player level had increased. This shocked him. The only way to level up without fighting was when another party member actively killed large numbers of enemies. He finally realized that the peon who had previously been abandoned was still alive and slaughtering goblins at an incredible speed. Meanwhile, Woo Jin did not care at all whether his teammates were leveling up or not. Woo Jin greatly enjoyed toying with the goblins and making them regret being born in that dungeon. To eliminate large numbers of goblins quickly, he used a clever strategy. He blocked the entrance to the goblin nest with huge piles of wood and then burned them to create thick smoke. The smoke filled the cave, causing the remaining goblins to suffocate. This brought a satisfied smile to Woo Jin's face. To him, it was a fiery and smoky revenge for the players who had previously been killed by goblins. After all the goblins were burned to ashes, Woo Jin waited for the appearance of the goblin champion. However, Seeing no sign of the monster, he prepared to search for another nest. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. A gigantic and terrifying goblin emerged from beneath the earth. The creature growled furiously at Woo Jin after seeing its entire tribe burned like charred meat. Instead of being afraid, Woo Jin felt excited to see the goblin champion appear before him because it saved him the trouble of searching for it. In his previous life, the goblin champion had slaughtered many beginner players before the Messiah Guild finally stepped in and defeated it. For beginners, elite monsters like the goblin champion were no different from the Grim Reaper. That was why, in his new life, Woo Jin decided to act first so there would be no more victims of the monster hiding among the goblins. Woo Jin drew his sword and prepared for battle. However, before he could step forward, his skeleton minion leapt ahead to face the goblin champion. Woo Jin noticed something different about the skeleton. Its eyes seemed to carry awareness, almost as if it had its own consciousness. He decided to give the minion another chance to prove itself. With a sword in hand, the skeleton stared directly at the goblin champion. The monster immediately attacked after sensing the killing intent coming from its opponent. But the skeleton swiftly dodged by sliding toward the monster's legs and slashing them. The attack pattern shocked Woo Jin because it reminded him of a battle against a two-legged monster in the past. Back then, the entire team struggled against the creature until Woo Jin stepped in and attacked its legs directly. The monster fell to its knees and was easily defeated afterward. Now, in his new life, the skeleton had copied that exact strategy. Even the minion's fighting style was similar to Woo Jin's. This surprised him because he never expected the minion to imitate the way he fought. However, he soon remembered the description of his skill. Summoned minions were influenced by the magical power of their user. While Woo Jin was still thinking about this, the skeleton quickly defeated the goblin champion and then waited for its master's final command. Woo Jin explained that in his previous life, he had mastered many types of weapons and was unmatched in one-on-one combat. However, with the current developments, he felt the need to change his plans. After defeating the goblin champion, Woo Jin obtained a legendary skill page from his class. It was a reward for the extraordinary achievement of clearing the goblin dungeon alone. Woo Jin did not expect to gain a legendary skill so quickly, but he did not think too much about it either. Meanwhile, in the real world, the manager of Phoenix Guild was shocked after learning that the dungeon had been completely cleared. He never expected a beginner team to finish the dungeon in just one day. He hurried outside and saw that only 4 members of the team had successfully returned. Just as they were about to mourn Woo Jin's death, they saw another figure emerge from the dungeon. It turned out that Woo Jin was the very person they had almost prayed for. Meanwhile, Joseph, who had barely escaped the dungeon alive, immediately felt fear when he saw Woo Jin walking out with a terrifying aura. He never imagined Woo Jin could be that powerful, strong enough to clear the entire dungeon alone. This raised many questions about Woo Jin's true identity because someone like him was clearly far from ordinary. Even so, in the grand scheme of the world, Woo Jin was still just an unnamed player. At the same time, Messiah Guild continued to grow more popular as people became increasingly tired of the excessive demands made by other players. While other guilds drained money from society and the government to clear dungeons, Messiah Guild did it for free. Not only that, they also conquered the highest floor dungeon in Korean history, something no other guild had ever achieved before. Just like in the real world, capitalism also dominated the world of players and dungeon hunting. Many guilds were backed by major corporations, and Messiah Guild was no different. After their massive victory, their market share skyrocketed to the top, making other guilds and investors jealous. One of the affected players was Josub, who drowned himself in alcohol while badmouthing Messiah Guild. His friend noticed the wound on his forehead and asked where it came from. Too embarrassed to admit it was caused by a goblin attack, Josub lied and claimed Woo Jin was responsible. He also accused Woo Jin of ignoring the team's safety just to obtain water inside the dungeon. The lie quickly spread and turned into a rumor across all guilds. The rumor caused Woo Jin to be known as a selfish player who did not care about the safety of his teammates. However, Woo Jin himself was unaware of it because he was busy trying to connect with Lee Jung without raising suspicion. After deciding on his next move, he headed to the guild to obtain additional funds. To do that, he needed to clear more dungeons. When he arrived, he was told that nobody wanted to join him on dungeon hunts. That was when Woo Jin learned about the rumors spreading around. Strangely, Woo Jin actually felt relieved because the situation made it easier for him to hunt dungeons alone without needing excuses. Meanwhile, a manager and a guild executive discussed the orc dungeon requested by Woo Jin. The executive reminded everyone that the same dungeon had once failed to be cleared by rising star John Yongyo and his team. The manager worried that Woo Jin was becoming overconfident. However, the executive decided to let him proceed, believing Woo Jin might surprise them. On the other hand, Woo Jin had no idea about the discussion because his mind was focused entirely on getting revenge against Lee Jun. Woo Jin finally found a way to approach his target. At night, the still poor Woo Jin drove an old car from the 1950s toward the gate dungeon location. A guild officer guided him while explaining the mission details. The dungeon was called Orc Hunter, a third-floor C-rank dungeon. The recommended level was level 13, far above Woo Jin's current level. Even though he knew the dungeon would be extremely difficult, Woo Jin had a strategy that might allow him to clear it alone. His plan was to hunt an orc first and then summon a skeleton to fight. Defeating an orc at his current level was obviously not easy. However, his many years of battle experience helped cover that weakness. Using the same strategy the skeleton had used against the goblin champion, Woo Jin targeted the legs of the giant orcs with swift and precise attacks until they collapsed to their knees. This was exactly what Woo Jin wanted. A creature without legs was nothing more than helpless prey before him. With a sharp knife, he ended the suffering of the orcs. Afterward, Woo Jin used the skeleton disease skill to summon skeleton soldiers from the bodies of the dead orcs. While Woo Jin was planning to conquer the orc dungeon alone, in the real world a bald man named Osai Chan was meeting someone named Lee Zan. Osai Chan placed a player file on the table, and Lee Zan read it from beginning to end. The profile belonged to Woo Jin and detailed his achievement of clearing dungeons alone shortly after awakening his powers. Lee Zan had never seen anything like it before. He even questioned whether the report was real or merely a fictional story made by recap video fans. His comment caught the attention of Lee's secretary, who had just returned with coffee. She questioned whether Lee Zan doubted her credibility in writing factual reports. The question made Lee Zan break into a cold sweat. To calm her down, Lee Zan began praising her beauty and her talent for writing excellent reports. Osai Chan also joined in the praise. He assured Lee Zan that the report had truly been written by Lee's secretary and was guaranteed to be 100% accurate. He was about to continue complimenting her when the bitter taste of the coffee in his mouth suddenly caught his attention. He almost spat it out as he asked the secretary whether she had used instant coffee instead of premium coffee. Lee's secretary replied that she bought the instant coffee during a meeting at Phoenix Guild. She also mentioned that the report was written on recycled paper. Hearing that, Osai Chan's attitude changed drastically. He began sipping the instant coffee as if it were the most delicious drink in the world. This made Lee Zan look down on Osai Chan, remembering how stingy the man was when it came to saving money. Lee Zan even blamed that stinginess for Osai Chan's hair loss. If Osai Chan could hear his thoughts, he probably would have thrown a punch already. Osai Chan then changed the subject from the pointless argument and asked Secretary Lee whether they had successfully purchased the rights to a new dungeon. Secretary Lee replied that he had checked several dungeons, but all of them were too expensive. That answer reminded Lee Zan of the dungeon Osai Chan had once saved. However, Osai Chan told him not to think about that one because he had already prepared several other dungeons to be cleared. Hearing this immediately worsened Lee Zan's mood. He begged for some time to rest since he had just cleared a dungeon yesterday. However, Osai Chan, who listened to too many self-care podcasts, simply told Lee Zan to act like a real man and keep working hard so he would not become lazy. Meanwhile, back to Woo Jin. Woo Jin watched his new orc skeleton get destroyed by a giant orc and began wondering whether it happened because his skill level was still too low. However, he was not too worried because he had learned an important lesson from the previous skill user. As long as there were corpses on the battlefield, he could continuously summon skeleton soldiers without limit to fight in his place. With his new skeleton army, Woo Jin cleared the orcs in front of him. After fighting for an entire day, he finally leveled up and managed to upgrade his hemtoxin skill to level 2. Even so, he was not fully satisfied because the dungeon felt inefficient for farming express. Because of that, Woo Jin cancelled his plan to hunt ordinary orcs and decided to focus only on the orc hunter. However, finding the orc hunter was not easy. The unique monster actually hunted its own kind. Based on his experience, Woo Jin assumed the monster was the leader of the group. Still, even the most experienced hunters could make mistakes.
That was why Woo Jin decided to move to another hunting area and search elsewhere inside the dungeon. At the same time, the orc hunter had just finished hunting one of the orcs and dragged the corpse away, leaving behind a trail of blood that Woo Jin could follow. After tracking the blood trail, Woo Jin finally found the dungeon boss. As an experienced hunter, he knew that fighting the dungeon boss one-on-one was extremely dangerous. Because of that, he decided to use a cunning strategy to defeat his opponent. Woo Jin took out a bow and arrows from his inventory, then coated one of the arrows with poison from his level 2 skill. His plan was to poison the orc hunter to weaken it, then use the skeleton's assistance to make the battle easier. After finalizing his strategy, he sent the skeletons to locate the dungeon boss.
Blood poured heavily from the orc hunter's eye. The wound that had already been painful became even worse as the poison spread throughout its body. Meanwhile, Woo Jin received a notification confirming that the orc hunter had been poisoned. In addition, his upgraded skill could now continuously reduce the orc hunter's health points over time. For Woo Jin, that condition was merely a bonus because he never intended to defeat his enemy slowly in the first place. After being poisoned, the once powerful orc hunter became a far easier target to defeat and clear the dungeon. With only 1 hour remaining before the dungeon closed, Woo Jin decided to search for the clues he needed. He wanted to find Jian Yongyo, a party member who had previously perished inside the dungeon. Unfortunately, all he found were the teammates' remains. However, Woo Jin refused to give up and kept searching until he finally discovered a hidden cave. Inside the cave, Woo Jin finds a human skull. He also found a diary containing information about the Blacklist Guild Phoenix. This was the very item he had been searching for. With that item now in his hands, Woo Jin was one step closer to capturing the man who would lead him closer to Lee Soo-jin in his new life. A few days ago, Woo Jin would have been deeply disappointed to find only a corpse instead of Jian Yongyo alive. However, after obtaining the legendary skill Eyes of Anubis, he gained the ability to see the memories of the dead. That realization nearly brought Woo Jin to tears because, in his previous life, he had always been unlucky. Now, for the first time, fortune finally seemed to be on his side in this new life.
Back in the abandoned cave, Woo Jin picked up Zhang Yongyeo's skull and stared into its empty eye sockets. Although the dead could not speak through Eyes of Anubis, the skill allowed him to peek into their secrets, something considered forbidden by the laws of the universe. Inside Zhang Yongyeo's memories, Woo Jin discovered fragments of events showing how the man betrayed his own teammates. Even though he knew hunting humans was illegal, Zhang Yongyeo did not care because he believed Park would protect him from any consequences. Returning to the present, Woo Jin felt chills realizing that viewing the memories of the dead was a forbidden practice. He also felt exhausted because the skill consumed far more magical energy than any other ability he possessed. Still, every sacrifice felt worthwhile, as this new information gave him full control over his next move against Park. Meanwhile, in the real world, a man knelt on the floor of Park's office while Park's subordinates mercilessly beat him. The unfortunate man was one of the managers who had previously assigned the dungeon to Woo Jin to clear alone. Park actually had other plans for that dungeon, which was why he was furious with the foolish manager. Park then ordered his secretary to take care of the man, which actually meant handing him over to Golik. The man kept begging for mercy, but no one felt sorry for him. On the other hand, Park became interested in Woo Jin and his ability to clear dungeons alone. However, his secretary reminded him about the bad rumors surrounding Woo Jin. Park did not care much about those rumors, though he admitted that Woo Jin would face great difficulties in the future because high-level dungeons were extremely dangerous for solo players. Before the conversation ended, Park received a report that Woo Jin had arrived to meet him. This immediately sparked Park's interest, as if a sheep had willingly walked into a lion's den. Meanwhile, at the Phoenix Guild headquarters, the higher-ups were discussing the latest proposal regarding an A+ ranked dungeon. Since this was the highest ranked dungeon discovered so far, every guild decided to participate by sending 20 players each. Within the Phoenix Guild, 18 slots had already been evenly distributed among the 3 divisions, leaving only 2 spots remaining. This situation placed great pressure on the guild executives, who still had not decided who would fill the remaining slots. At that moment, one of the executives received a call from Park requesting that one of the 2 remaining spots be given to Woo Jin. The request shocked the executive because he never expected a ruthless man like Park to make such a proposal. He felt there was a hidden scheme behind it. However, since it was a matter between Park and Woo Jin, he decided to let events unfold as they wished. Back with Park, he stood looking out the office window when his secretary asked why he had given one of the final slots to Woo Jin. Park replied that he wanted to see how far Woo Jin could go and what he would eventually bring back.
Park also viewed Woo Jin as a disposable card that could be used whenever necessary and discarded afterward. An hour earlier, Woo Jin had visited Park's office and informed him about the blacklist discovered from Zhang Yongyeo's corpse. At first, Park thought Woo Jin intended to blackmail him for money. However, when Woo Jin stated that he only wanted one slot in the A+ ranked dungeon, Park was slightly surprised because he did not expect such a request from a rookie player. This only made the situation more interesting. Park asked once again whether Woo Jin was truly certain about his choice and whether he would regret it later. Woo Jin confidently replied that he understood exactly what he was facing. Woo Jin also promised that as long as Park gave him one slot, he would forget all previous incidents. Park eventually accepted the deal, but with one condition. Meanwhile, at Jongbu University, a dungeon expert responsible for guiding the players participating in the A+ rank dungeon held a conference explaining the dungeon and the dangers hidden inside it. The dungeon was also an orc dungeon, but this time it contained elite-tier orc champions far stronger than ordinary orc hunters. The maximum number of players allowed inside was 150, with a level restriction below 120. Woo Jin knew about this dungeon from his previous life because it had once become the site of a massive tragedy. Nearly 70 people died inside the dungeon, which amounted to almost half of all the players who entered. In his previous life, Woo Jin had already suspected that some of the victims were not killed by orcs, but by fellow players instead. However, without any evidence, he was unable to bring justice to those who died so unfairly.
After being given a second chance at life, Woo Jin decided to prevent the tragedy by joining the dungeon raid himself. He was also curious about the rewards hidden inside the dungeon. Since Messiah Guild eventually conquered the dungeon in the past, Woo Jin began doubting whether Lee Sejin had ever truly been a good person. Woo Jin suspected that Lee Sejin was responsible for the deaths of nearly half the players, although he believed the man never acted directly. Instead, Lee Sejin most likely used spies planted within other guilds to carry out his plans. After a short meeting, the players gathered at the dungeon gate and prepared for teleportation. Inside the dungeon, many people looked confused because of the overwhelming number of participants. Even so, Messiah Guild remained calm as always. They were the first to organize a proper battle formation, motivating the other guilds to prepare as well. Just as everyone got ready, an orc suddenly emerged from the forest and attacked. Messiah Guild immediately confronted it. Their main tank drew the monster's attention with defensive skills while the casters finished it off with magic.
Just when they thought the situation was over, the ground suddenly shook violently. Hundreds of orcs charged toward the players with obvious killing intent in their eyes. Meanwhile, Woo Jin sat calmly on top of a nearby tree, observing the entire battlefield from afar. He stayed calm because he never intended to move together with the guilds in the first place. Woo Jin planned to act alone. The chaos of battle gave him the perfect chance to move freely. His plan was to let the guilds deal with the thousands of orcs while he focused on hunting the orc champion. Once he found it, Woo Jin intended to defeat it alone and claim the dungeon rewards without anyone noticing. He knew the guilds would focus entirely on fighting the massive orc army. In his view, this was the safest way to reduce casualties when facing an elite monster. The situation also created the perfect opportunity for solo fighters like him who wanted nothing to do with other players. The massive commotion eventually caught the orc champion's attention.
The creature immediately sent its orc troops to investigate the disturbance and eliminate the intruders. Watching from a distance, Woo Jin felt satisfied. If the entire army had remained together, fighting the orc champion while dealing with the remaining forces would have been far more difficult. Back with the guild forces, they had only just defeated the first wave of orcs when news arrived that nearly 9,000 more were still remaining. Many considered the situation too dangerous to continue advancing deeper into the dungeon. Several guilds criticized Lion Guild for temporarily retreating to prepare for the next battle. They called Lion Guild cowards for refusing to fight head-on. However, Lion Guild ignored the criticism and continued withdrawing their forces. Meanwhile, Woo Jin prepared to attack the orc champion. He summoned 2 skeleton soldiers and sent them forward to distract the target. His strategy remained the same as before. He planned to weaken the orc champion little by little using arrows coated with poisonous blood. Woo Jin believed the orc champion would gradually weaken if the battle dragged on long enough. By enduring the fight for some time, he was confident he could eventually defeat it. At first, Woo Jin thought his plan was flawless. However, the moment the two skeleton soldiers attacked, one of them was destroyed instantly. The remaining skeleton barely managed to avoid the orc champion's counterattack. Woo Jin immediately realized that the orc champion was far stronger than the information he remembered from his previous life. Realizing this, he quickly drew his bow and aimed directly for the monster's eye. But the orc champion dodged the arrow with ease. Woo Jin was shocked because he never expected the creature's perception to be that sharp. Soon after, the last skeleton soldier was destroyed as well when its sword failed to penetrate the orc champion's thick skin. Woo Jin finally realized that his perfect strategy had completely failed. In his current condition, defeating the monster alone was impossible. Because of that, he decided to retreat. To him, the wisest choice was to abandon a battle that could not be won. Strangely enough, the orc champion began chasing him. Normally, dungeon monsters would never pursue humans who tried to flee. However, the orc champion seemed different from ordinary monsters. After chasing Woo Jin for some time, the creature finally stopped. Woo Jin managed to hide himself within the dense forest. In the same forest, members of Lion Guild were also searching for the orc champion. When they saw someone leaping from tree to tree above them, they were completely shocked. They never expected another person crazy enough to hunt the orc champion alone. Fortunately for Woo Jin, his face was covered, preventing anyone from recognizing him. After Woo Jin left the area, members of Lion Guild began collapsing one after another. Their leader shouted angrily, demanding that whoever was hiding reveal themselves. But no one answered. Not long afterward, the guild leader also fell, and the entire team was wiped out.